Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is the I Own podcast, and today we have on Brad. And Brad I've known for a number of years now since I moved to Squamish, and I can tell you that all of our meetings, I've had a positive experience with him, which is something really beautiful for me. So I've really appreciated our friendship here. Brad is a Squamish local like myself, and he is a space holder among many other things. So I'll pass it off to him and give him a little bit of space here for an introduction.
Hi, Zach.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm really stoked to be here. I love the place that we're sitting. It's really cultivating a good container here for us to explore. Space holder, we were just talking about what I am. I think most of my life I've identified as entrepreneurial, but in recent years I've come to, I guess, find myself just holding space in various capacities, even if it is for entrepreneurs to grow and expand. So it's a bit about me.
Yeah, we're just talking about this. It's like so many people are stepping more into their multi-dimensionality and having this very not cookie cutter way of living in the world and what they offer from services, yoga teachers, coaches, entrepreneurs, writers, podcasters. And I think that for many people is going to be the mainstay of it's so hard to label that. And
Totally.
in our own, it's like we are multidimensional people with so many different gifts and roles that we play, archetypes, etc. So that's just like one of the things that we're going to have to deal with.
It really is. And it's interesting because one of the core practices that I've engaged with and that has been taught and encouraged from many of my teachers is to move away from roles. Mm-hmm. So I've done practices where you just sit in front of a fire with all your roles listed and then just burn them. Mm-hmm. So it's so much of the journey for me has been like moving away from identifications and moving away from roles, which keep you centered in a smaller sense of yourself. But then in the practical world, there's some simplicity and ease to being able to say you're something so that it's usable in a social setting.
That's just what I was thinking. Just like our ego in many ways is a social identity used for kind of a practical value. It's many other components.
Yeah.
But same with these roles that we play. It's like if I'm going to put myself on Instagram, I need to have a kind of business front.
Consistency.
Consistency.
If you don't have consistency, then you don't want to get boxed in either because that's the journey.
Yeah, that's the evolving world. I know that I went from being coaching and specialize in breath work, and now I've just thrown it all under the term holistic medicine because I can put in my coaching, breath work, Chinese medicine, Qigong, everything.
Yeah.
So I do think it comes to a culmination point where we get a general understanding about many of the things we're doing and can create some kind of umbrella term for it.
Yeah, and I think entrepreneur is a very umbrella term as well. Mm-hmm. So I often will just use that for the entire business orientation. Is entrepreneur seems to umbrella a lot, but except for the fact that it's been a very diluted word over time.
Yeah.
Everyone's just an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Everyone's a coach. Everyone's
Yeah, but it's that same umbrella term as holistic or what did you say? Holistic medicine.
Holistic medicine.
Yeah, holistic medicine. It could be a lot of things.
Yeah.
Right.
Keeps it easy.
It keeps it easy and open.
So in your work, in its broadest terms, what are some of the modalities, techniques, and background with that?
Which work?
Whatever comes to your mind. You can do like a broad overview, or if you want to narrow in on something, we can jump off there.
Yeah. So, I mean, my earliest work or where I come from in my adult life is just a business background, trying to build businesses and building them and learning how to make them profitable and learning all the fundamentals of that. And as you kind of accelerate in that path, you kind of end up as a coach because, if it's your own company, there's a lot of coaches out here right now that are just, like their business is that they're a coach. So their business is to coach other businesses. Mm-hmm. For me, it didn't really work that way. It evolved into helping other people with their businesses, but really I had to become a coach because I have to coach all my staff and my managers. Mm-hmm. So, it's like a skill in business. And that was like a 10-year journey of just like, you learn all the fundamentals of business, marketing, sales, operations or production, accounting, all that stuff. Then you have to teach all of your people those same skills so that you're not the lid on your own business. So as a leader, you have to become a coach in order to coach those below you. Mm-hmm. And that went on for a while until I realized that you can just keep growing your business life and everything. But I went through an identity like crisis, I suppose, which we could get into or not. But that led me into inner work. Right. So the first kind of question was was revealed to me on plant medicines, which is the first kind of guide was mushrooms. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine advised me, and I hadn't worked with mushrooms as a kid. I didn't do anything and I didn't work with drugs is what they would call them, but plant medicines. Yeah. And he advised me to sit with mushrooms with a blindfold in a room and turn off the lights. And then that was when the first challenge, I suppose, of realizing that I wasn't my identity. And that's a big problem because all of my invested time and conscious awareness is to become my identity that I'm creating, which is the ego structure and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But when I realized that's not what I am, I panicked. Mm-hmm. So those early practices, that was the only practice for years. Sit in a room with mushrooms with a blindfold. Mm-hmm. And it disassembled everything, basically. And it was really scary at first because if I'm not anyone, then who am I? And it was kind of just a stuck in the unknown and kind of like in the emptiness. And that was a scary place for me.
What was your frequency of use in those years?
How often?
Yeah.
I would do ceremony once every week for about a year.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
And then because you hadn't had much guidance on this.
I had no guidance.
And then what was your integration work? Like I remember when
I journaled.
You journaled. Okay.
So I was advised. The other thing was it was really important to me that I didn't want to read anything about it. Mm-hmm. So I didn't do any readings of any kinds. I hadn't read any spiritual texts yet because I didn't want to be biased. So I would just journal what was occurring and what I was experiencing. So it was a very exciting time because there's all these new insights, but it was also a very scary time. Mm-hmm. And I was really fascinated by all of it. But I was dealing with heartbreak at the time. That was what catapulted it.
From a relationship.
I was dealing with heartbreak, and what was fascinating was the heartbreak itself. It was like, I just found it such a painful experience, but also such a fascinating feeling because I had never experienced anything like that. Mm-hmm. And my kind of base demeanor or identification was I'm a happy person. Mm. So I was also like, I had this feeling of like, you got to pay attention. I knew I had to pay attention because if I don't pay attention, I'm going to heal. I'm going to be a happy person again pretty quickly. So I don't have a lot of time to really observe this new awareness, this new experience. Yeah. And I got to learn about sadness, which I hadn't really experienced before. And it's a very profound experience.
And without any knowledge or facilitation, you were able to work with these emotions, feel them, and move through them.
I just cry. Yeah.
You
just that's great. But I didn't know how to cry. Until I was 28 years old, I didn't know how to cry. Yeah. So I learned how to cry, and that opened up my my spectrum of experience. Mm-hmm. Right? Because when you only have a couple, like you use the tools you have, and if you're if you're a happy person, then you'll just. What I've realized in my own journey is I just always everything has a positive spin. Yeah. You'd always put a positive spin. It's always great. Yeah. Which is, at some level, it's a good life skill. It's a good tool, but it also limits your ability to experience different things. Mm-hmm. But that was really the start of it. And, we say space holder. The first person you're holding space for is yourself. Mm-hmm. So I learned how to hold space for myself and sit in the discomfort and deal with it.
I think it was quite noteworthy. That's why I asked you about you were able to feel those emotions coming up and move through them on your own because, you're a very gifted space holder and I've known you for a while and you've held space in a really powerful way. And why I mention that is because a lot of people, when they do medicines and other things, without any background or knowledge, they don't go into those places. They don't work with the emotion. They don't move it. I remember when I was quite young and experiencing psilocybin and having quite big revelations for myself. And then I would be like, everyone should try this, right? Coming from a teenager, just wanted everyone to share in this, and I would give them to other people, or they would try them, and they wouldn't go into any of the stuff that I was going.
I noticed that too. I had the same experience.
It's like, I would say it's avoidance, or they weren't looking to do that kind of work, whereas my natural intuitive thing was to just move into those spaces and then to begin doing that work. And I'm seeing that same thing with you, right?
Yeah, and I've had that, like, you put someone, you show them exactly the same technique you used, and then they come out and they're like, that's cool. Yeah, cool. Awesome. And then nothing changes. Like, they're just, that was neat.
Right.
And yeah, you think that they're going to have, like, because for me it was like, oh my God, I don't know what reality is.
Yeah.
And that was terrifying. Oh my God, I don't know what reality is. And it's interesting later when I started reading spiritual texts and stuff, because I'd reread my journals and I'd see all the alignments. I'm like, oh my God. And that really helped me understand that, like, all the wisdom's inside of you, and the knowledge can't be lost because we just have it inside of us.
Yeah.
So these alignments between what I had written in my own words versus a lot of the sacred texts, like the laws of impermanence and change and all these things.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying. And my three earliest questions were not questions, but like, first was like, I don't know who I am. Mm-hmm. I don't know what I am. Mm-hmm. And then that led me to, I don't know when it is. And I don't know where I am. So like these three was what, and I really genuinely didn't know anymore. Because I realized they were all conceptual. They were all just concepts of the mind that had built into a structure or societal paradigm so that we can have a sense of knowing this place by description. But then without those, without that really believing in it, if you don't believe in the year 2022, or wait, what are we, 2023 now? You have to believe in it, otherwise it doesn't work. And everyone else, we need everyone to believe in it.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's not there. And for me, it wasn't there anymore. So my ability to relate to others was pretty limited as well.
Yeah. So it
was lonely.
Integral questions. Those are known as fundamental questions. Because you can ask them for the rest of your life and not fully come to an answer.
No.
Because you're continually asking that and discovering that in each moment.
Absolutely. And so you're really, at some point, you realize that you're not going to answer them, and you build comfort, and you don't need to know. You don't need to know it in that way. And the struggle was when I wanted to know. I didn't like not knowing who I was, and I didn't like not believing in time anymore. Mm-hmm. Like I resisted it.
Yeah.
But deep down, I knew that I didn't. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So much of what we're talking about is like the mind, or we can talk about the ego structure, which is all encapsulated in the personal mind and body. It wants to have that knowingness of like, what is concrete, what is going to last, my, the I, me, mine, time, space, certainty.
Yeah.
All of those things are entangled in that mind structure, and wanting to feel safe in that.
Yeah, and keep in mind, I'm going through this. Yeah. I am still leading. I'm still the leader of my company, and I'm still having to play the roles, which I know are a facade now.
Right.
And so this is a huge conflict for probably 3 years. Mm-hmm. Is I'm pretending. I don't know if I'm pretending even. I have to play these roles, which are not authentic anymore. Mm-hmm. But I really do have to like pretend and like play the role and be the leader.
Yeah.
Because I'm the leader of the business. And I didn't even know why we do what we do anymore. I was like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Everyone's super like into this. And we're all like, all these customers, all these people that are all like paying a lot of money for this stuff. And I'm like, this stuff is such nonsense. It's not relevant.
Yeah.
It became irrelevant. Mm-hmm. But I also had to keep doing it.
Of course.
Because I had like overhead. I was in growth phase for my company at the time. I had like a ton of leverage.
Yeah.
Right. I had just spent like all my money buying like overhead and trucks and vehicles, like all sorts of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I was leveraged out from a just like financial point of view, and I'm like, I can't quit. So that was really good. That was interesting. Yeah.
And then what was the journey towards living in more alignment and the embodiment of your true nature, or what you call like your higher truth, I would say, right?
That's ongoing. The biggest integration I ever had that helped was finally because at first I was like, oh my God, this is spirituality. I started to segregate.
Yeah.
And these are spiritual things. Business is not spiritual.
Right.
Was a story that I still had, and that's a conflict. So these are spiritual things. These aren't spiritual things, and so this is all out of alignment, and this is what I really am. And once I realized that everything is spirit, and we're just creating stuff, I don't know. That integration though is just realizing that everything we are is spiritual. It brought me a lot of peace. So then I could return to peace and just be again.
Yeah.
But that took a long time. That was years, many years.
Yeah.
Like 4 years or something.
Yeah, that resonates really well. And it's like collapse was an initial, like, this is what spiritual is. And that's like the beginning of like another dualistic setup, which is important in the beginning. It's like we need to have a conception of right and wrong before we transcend right and wrong.
Yeah.
So it's like stages in our development of consciousness. And at first it's like there's a spiritual and then there's a material or worldly life. And then at some point that just collapses and then they're all one.
Yeah.
But that initial differentiation is important. So
I don't know if you went through this, but I denied like material as spiritual.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like material world is not spiritual.
Well, it's still like spiritual is one of those words that's thrown around in so many ways.
Yeah.
And it's different depending on the context you're using. Because for many people, spiritual refers to things that are not material in a certain context of speaking. Yeah. Because if we just say spiritual is everything, we're not really saying anything. No. It's like people talk about meditation. They're like, well, I meditate when I do work and I meditate when I do this. And it's like, that's true. But if we just say that, then everything's meditation and there's no such thing as like meditation in quotes.
Yes.
So it's like context and discernment of that. The three definitions I like to work with in spiritual is like it can mean the more energetic or the higher chakra domains, love and truth, the realms of light, etc.
Yeah.
It can also mean on a very pragmatic level, and this is from Paul Chek, is taking responsibility for what you're creating in this moment, which is like really grounded, and that doesn't have that differentiation between energetic and material.
Yep.
And then the process of self-realization or knowing the self, which I think is like self-regulation, self-mastery, self-knowing, all the things that can come with that. And that's part of the journey, which once again, it takes place on both the material, the individual level, as well as the collective and beyond. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a little bit too, like you mentioned self-accountability or taking responsibility for what you're creating.
Yeah.
As I started to reclaim aspects of all of the things, because basically I was creating things and I didn't want to anymore. Like I didn't want to take responsibility for what I was creating because I was rejecting it. Like that's not good. Mm-hmm. It's not okay to create like, and they're normal society things. So some of it was a complete rejection of society, and what we do as people, and which is not love. Right? Today, I feel like I'm a lot more like I can just be a person. I can just be a human, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't have any charge on it anymore. It's okay to just be a normal person.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, just reclaiming that, and then from that, I'm just a lot more whole in how I feel. I've just taken responsibility for just being what I am, and I'm always working to do that. Meanwhile, having the balance of more inquiry, more higher awareness, elevating my energy, all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's like I know it as kind of to what you're describing is like there's this awakening to our greater knowing and truth. And then there's this recalibration, also known as like integration of like going through and really understanding what we're consciously choosing in our life and what we're unconsciously choosing, which is creating our life. And then it's like if we have a previous life that's more or less out of alignment, we have to kind of like weed through all the decisions that we're making that are keeping us caught in those cycles. And that work is so continual, and we're always going into a higher level of awareness, making new choices, making another alignment. But the one thing that we develop along the way is like love for ourselves in the process, so that we can actually be present here and now, surrender that there is a higher level and there's a lower level. And we're always moving between those, because if we don't develop that love, we'll never be gentle enough to be present with our process, and we'll never actually
totally
arrive anywhere. We'll just be continually on the spiritual ascension rat race. It's a whole other one.
The spiritual ascension rat race. Yeah. And I feel like right now, this period in my life, I don't know if we talked about it already or if it was before we started the podcast, but I'm in difficult emotions right now at this period in my life because of events. Mm-hmm. And I haven't felt the level of these difficult emotions since that first awakening, that first insight when I started working with mushrooms, which was heartbreak and deep, deep sadness. Mm-hmm. And I'm in it again now. I'm feeling it, and I'm just like, oh man. And I'm being present with it and trying not to avoid it. But it's so hard to not avoid it, to not want to avoid it.
Yeah.
But I know that the lessons are there for me right now. And one of the things I've been telling my friends is just like, I feel like I'm gathering more new information. There's like, there's a sense of like why the reason I'm going, I really feel like I'm going through this for a reason, and I really trust in the process, which is something I'm grateful for. Like my level of trust for the universe and for like what happens is what is supposed to happen. And it feels like I'm going through this period right now where I need more information in order for the next phase of my life. And the information this time is not going to be coming from the light. Mm. So it's like a deep sense of like, it's time for shadow work. Yeah. And I'm not really that familiar with shadow work. Mm-hmm. But I feel like that's where I need more information from whatever that means. I'm not exactly sure yet, but shadow work is upon me is what it feels like.
Since this is organic conversation, I'm not sure how this will flow, but I'd be curious if you want to share a few of the details of what you're going through. But I'd also like this to not be too one-sided, just focus on you. And maybe I can try to come in and integrate some of the things that I'm also working with, and we'll parallel process in a conversation format for everyone to listen to. Because I am as well going through a lot of shadowy pieces. Yeah. So I think like we're going through a similar process with completely different, pieces. So maybe we can kind of back and forth a little bit about what we're going through and then work with that. I think it'll flow.
Yeah. So just sharing the context of what's brought this up.
Sure.
So in the simplest language, since the start of like my whole life, it's a very conventional path. A lot of my conditioning and what I am has come from my family and my ancestry, and I'm very much an embodiment of that ancestry, which I've started looking at more closely over the last 12 months. And recently, in the last few months, I've been in a monogamous relationship for 5 years now. And before that, I was in another one for like 8 years. And I've pretty much just always been in that conventional type of relationship, which I very much enjoy. Mm-hmm. And I fell in love with another woman this summer. And it really split me because the experience of love was very real. But the again, it's back to like the way I saw myself. And I'm not a polyamorous person. But yet the emotion would be described you're a polyamorous person. Yeah. So it really split me up and I guess it started tearing my paradigm apart and led me into uncertainty. And I've kind of been a very stable, certain person my whole life. And I identify that way. And through this uncertainty, it's really brought up a lot of insecurities and stuff. And I started doing more deep like breath work this year and just doing trainings and stuff. And I started to realize that this is all coming from like really early age instability within myself and insecurities. And it's still really early, but I can't tell where it is. But all my behaviors in my life, I think, are about stability and security. And
did you have a pretty stable upbringing? Super
stable.
Okay. Both parents around?
Yeah. It's both parents, my grandparents, no divorce in the family. Like, parents are together, grandparents are together on both sides. Like, just all that stuff. And yeah, I'm not sure why it's coming up exactly, but I called this experience in. You know, when you talk about taking accountability for what we create and what we call in, at some level, my signal was up that I'm available for whatever this is. And that's part of the question is like, why did I call this in? Right? I clearly called in this experience of another person. I'm open enough that another person can enter into my sphere of intimacy and love in that way, and sexuality. And one of my core values is sacred union and like intimacy, but this has split me, and it's been really confusing because of that split. Like, so the feeling inside of me is unsettled.
Yeah, I haven't been in a longer term monogamous relationship for a number of years since being on my more dedicated spiritual path. Yeah. But I know that these were things that were coming up in my previous relationship. It's like, is monogamous possible for me when I still have like that? It's at a level of the subconscious, but like an openness that I wasn't fully aware of or recognizing. And I think it's something that most individuals will have to deal with because it's like a possibility. And I think it's deeper in the conditioning. Some people never touch into it because it never comes up in whatever circumstance or life. But I think it's coming up for you in a really powerful way. And it's a really big teaching, because I would assume that if I were in another relationship, that idea would come up. It's like, well, am I on some level monogamous? Is there other strains coming through?
I'm not even sure if it's supposed to, like, there's 3 options that came up for me, and I literally don't know which one it was even supposed to be. Still, it was like, this thing's either coming into my life to, I'm going to become this polyamorous person and it works. Sure. Or it's going to totally strengthen, like, it's not going to work and I'm going to become so much stronger with my current partner going through this challenge. Or it's about to break me up into, like, single life, and I'm going to go deeper into my practices on a personal level and be single. Yeah. And I was really open to all of them still. And I still am now, which is hard to admit to, but it's just like, it's time for truth. It's time to really just like, whatever's the right one, being open and trusting that that's the correct one. Yeah. Which is hard to admit, because when you're a controller and someone of certainty, you pave your path. You want to be the one that's like, I know what I'm going to do it, and nothing's going to get in the way of me going forward with my plan, my vision. Yes. My personal vision. Yeah. When obviously God has a much bigger vision happening always, but.
Yeah, I appreciate and honor that level of surrender. I can kind of interject and put what I'm going through. I'm in a 6-month or maybe even a year now dieta of abstinence, celibacy, dietary restrictions.
You're a monster. Oh my God.
And this is like of multiple years of doing, I'm going to do a 2-year one, etc. And what's being asked of me at this time is, yes, an incredible degree of like discipline, because I can't even think about, since we're talking about sex and relationships, I can't even think about that. So there's like this one, it's like, I've been celibate for over a year and a little bit before, but I was entertaining ideas in my mind. I wasn't as strict and I wasn't as deep in this process, but it's like bouncing around with not wanting to suppress or repress, which I think is really ugly. And yet totally. I'm in this term. So it's like an anchoring of like using my higher consciousness to anchor in, yes, you could go into that, but let's take the mind and the potential of that desire and energy and place it somewhere else for a higher good. And in that, I have to like put a piece of my ego and my desires aside and then orientate my energies in a different direction that's more serving for the all. Yeah. So it's a very big piece of just like placing things that aren't bad. I'm not saying things are right or wrong in this context, but it's this period which I, it's kind of walking into and treading and really realizing what I've all called in.
Totally, man.
And then the other piece is like, I'm being asked in this process from my higher self and from the plants I'm working with to actually surrender all the dreams that I have of like my future with my business and even the potential of having a wife and children.
Yeah.
Because it's like, that's the spiritual process from my understanding is like, you can have those. And I do have a scaffolding of these dreams that I want with my business, and I'm leaving a lot of room and potential.
Yeah.
And I'm also still surrendered to a way. And in that, I might even just like completely abandon everything I've been doing and go to the jungle. Right. Or end up not being, maybe be celibate for the rest of my life. Yeah. So it's like I'm working at that deep level of my conditioned desires and, you know, the structure of who I've been operating with and what's been being used as fuel for my motivation, and it's all like falling out from underneath me.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. What rang when you said that for me was like that balance of not suppressing. And again, it's not about this being the right path, the wrong path. These are good things, bad things, but like to go on one certain path. Like even I'll relate it to what I'm doing right now because I'm in just basic dieta, preparing for a pilgrimage in Peru. So we're going on for a couple of weeks or 2 or 3 weeks on a pilgrimage. And obviously we have to abstain from sex amongst all the other things and dietary stuff. Mm-hmm. And even me, and I'm not, I've been consistently having sex every day for like, because I've always had partner.
Yes.
My body is so attuned to it. Uh-huh. So I've noticed it's only been 4 days or 5 days, I guess. Day 5 now.
Right.
And like, I'm so like the last 5 days, like I am so like, don't think that, like very much the centering my mind away from any of those thoughts because it's torture. Mm-hmm. It's like, I'm so committed to the fact that I'm not having sex, which in your case you are too, for a much longer period, that like, because it's not an option, the thoughts are actually quite destructive. Uh-huh. Like it's just going to tempt me. I'm going to feel bad. I'm going to be distracted. I'm going to activate my lower area. And then I'm just going to feel anxious because I need to get this desire satisfied. And that's what my body's used to. Mm-hmm. So I notice how like, I'm not sure if I'm suppressing it, but yeah, ultimately I'd be suppressing at some level until the body gets out of that attunement. Yeah. Then maybe it just does dissolve. I don't know if it ends up being suppression anymore. It just kind of might vacate the. Yeah. But I think also our bodies, at some level, they want to have sex.
I've heard a teaching recently on suppression, repression, and suppression not being so bad. Because we do need to suppress, go and do our work if we're having something.
Yeah, I can't just get all horny every time I see a girl.
Exactly. Repression, on the other hand, is a little deeper and a little darker. And that's the one to stay away from. So in this process, I think that a little suppression's okay.
Yes.
And then there's a deeper process and it's like a deeper listening and working with that energy. Yeah. In a way that's like, just as I was kind of saying, is to like taking that potential energy that you would usually make decisions and you orientate your mind towards that desire, etc. And being like, okay, I recognize that. I'm not repressing it. I'm seeing it, feeling it, but I'm not going to continue to feed its fire.
Totally.
And then I'm going to take my mind and my consciousness, which I have free will to do, and then orientate it towards my dreams or something that is not absorbed in.
Or recirculate it.
Sure.
It's like that fire, and then you're using it. It's almost like the regular practices. If you're not ejaculating every time you have sex, like take the energy, build up that, see where it is, cultivate it, and then circulate it.
Yeah, it's alchemy.
Yeah, which is something that I've really had to step into this year. Right? You can't just be ejaculating all the time. Like, so that's one thing that's really interesting is like learning how to just circulate your energy, and especially combined with stepping into breath this year, actually just circulating the energy.
Well, another
more naturally
is like, I've been practicing these Taoist lovemaking arts and Tantra for a while too. Yeah. One, I had repurposed it so that sex is not, it's not ugly because I'm not depleting myself.
Yes.
But then I learned here, especially in the last years or so, that there's no desire involved in the highest level of tantric sex.
Yeah.
Which is very difficult. It's one thing to circulate energy around and not ejaculate. It's another thing to make love without desire, because that conditioning is so deep. And I'm know
not there.
If it's
Definitely
possible
not.
to do without a period of austere celibacy to really get a hold of that desire at its root, because desire is fundamental. It doesn't matter what you desire. Desire is the same.
Yeah.
I can give an example of fasting, because most people have done that. At first, you have desire for food. There's hunger, and there's a number of different biochemical reasons for that. But if you just wait a little longer, for many people, 18, 24 hours, that goes away.
Yeah.
But it comes back in cycles, some long and kind of just mild. Others, it'll just go away completely. Then it'll go really sharp. You'll really crave food.
Yeah.
And these are desire cycles. And when you get an understanding of how they run through your system and you're able to just witness them, with a high degree of consciousness and intention to be in alignment with your dharma or whatever pulls you through,
Yeah.
then you can work with that energy in a whole different level. And I don't know if it's
That makes
possible.
sense though, to like have to step away for a while to be
Yeah.
able to come back. Yeah, I don't have experience with it.
And I don't know if it has to be like a 6 months of celibacy, but it can even be like a training program of when you do your practice exercises for Tao or sexual Kung Fu or whatever you're doing, to assure that you're not thinking about women, you're not sexually stimulating yourself with pictures or any other thought. You're just working with the energy, which is like true meditation. There's no desire attached to it. It's an end into itself. So there's a whole repurposing, and this is at a cellular level, that would be happening.
Yeah.
That would have to happen in your personal cultivation practices in order for you to show up. And then I think different schools have different understandings of the actual practice of lovemaking, because some, I think, work with desire because it feeds a certain fire.
Yeah.
And maybe that's okay. And some don't want it at all. In the tantric literature, it's interesting that sometimes they would not have sex with their wives in a tantric way because there's too much intermingling and attachment. So they would have a tantric partner, and it would be completely like formal. No desire. Maybe they're not even attracted to one another. They do their practices, and that's a way to get around that. So it's a lot more complex than the sexual tantra you see on YouTube that everyone's boasting about. It's a lot more dedication than most people understand.
Yeah.
And I'm not there. I just read a lot of this stuff and practiced some.
There's a lot you can do with all, like anything to do with sex. Like there's just so much to explore in that. Like even just the last 5 days, like, you know, when you see a beautiful woman and you look at her, and then it's essentially taking your energy. Like it took it. Now my awareness, my energy is no longer on myself. Mm-hmm. I've become it's like the awareness is drawn an attachment to something outside of
this old subconscious program.
Yeah. So you're kind of losing your centeredness. You're losing your energy, and it's influencing you in a way that could be not the healthiest.
Yeah. And we leak a lot of energy that way.
Tons.
And we don't realize it until we go through a really deep process of meditation, or where we actually, you know, vipassana or whatever it is, to take a dedicated period to not be in desire.
Oh, I want to share something right now that I've really learned about myself too, is how I get, one of the things I get from sex is certainty. And I've never thought of it that way.
Explain that, yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to even understand, but like when I'm actually penetrated, I just feel safe. I feel certain. I feel safer. So when I'm not having sex, I feel like not as secure. So that has to do with me.
On what dimension of like security?
I'm not even sure. It's like it's like comfort food. It's like I'm comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, because it's just so patterned into like how long I've been in relationship with partners, right? I haven't had a big period of single life and all these things in my adult life.
Is it just like certainty within like the safety of that relationship as well? Is this more like
I'm not sure. No, I think it's all a separate thing as well. There's like the actual relationship and like contact and connection.
Yeah.
And then there's actual sexual bodily connection.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I learned too is like when I started, when this polyamorous thing kind of happened, my body also, I learned, had like a lot of loyalty, body loyalty.
In what way?
Like at first I wouldn't be able to, like, I couldn't get an erection very well because there's like penis loyalty, stuff like that.
Right.
Like you're just like, you know, body, mind, spirit, soul connection, right? There's like,
yes.
Okay, my mind is like, God, this girl's so attractive. Mentally, we're totally in alignment. Physically, like, she's bomber, like all these things. But then when it actually comes to the act, the erection wouldn't happen necessarily right away. It took time before that started to, the body got comfortable. Yeah. Because there was a loyalty. My penis and my body was like loyal to my current partner. And I thought that was actually really, well, kind of shitty on one side, but also really beautiful too.
Yeah.
Like it made me really feel like, wow, my body's so loyal to my partner. That's so, it made me, I appreciated it, but I also was like, damn it.
Yeah. As you explained that, I'm like seeing like multiple centers of like awareness, and it's like, your lower centers are like, I don't know, this is the right thing. And
exactly.
A part of you is like, I think it's the right thing,
dude. Dude, like, totally,
this
man.
Is not the one we usually.
So, like I said, the experience of this whole thing has been fascinating on so many levels, and now I'm in the heartbreak portion of the experience. So I'm going to be being present with that.
Yeah.
But things like that are just so fascinating to learn. Like, how would you know that stuff? It's just so, and it's kind of cool.
I wish it was like, you know, when you played as kids and you'd have that like ball and it had many shapes, like triangles and squares, and you had to pick the square to put in the square.
Yeah.
Because it's like only one will fit in there. But sex isn't like that, because it always fits and it always feels good. It's not so clear as putting a square peg in a circle.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit more finesse in there.
So I guess I was on like a different path than you've been on lately.
Well, before, like, I haven't been in a serious relationship in 4 years, but I have had intimate encounters in that time.
Yeah.
And I will say that I have some subconscious patterns that I'm also being asked to let go of. For example, for some reason, the way that I'm wired in my patterning is like, I really love Asian women.
Okay, what's wrong with so?
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but it's like, it's so built into my system that there's like this, how to say, I'm looking to attune to the awakened perception, and that's a place of being in my true nature. And there's this want or desire, I don't know if that's the right word, to see things as equal. So when encountering an individual, if I have too much preference over my personal desire for what I like, then I'm imprinting that, and that's more from my desires rather than from the awakened perception, which would see individuals more as equal.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm looking to untangle if that is just conditioning, or if this is like a preference that is actually meant to be. Because it's like, right, at a very young age,
it's
really
kind of like someone calling in, like, say you have a bad relationship, and then you immediately, the next relationship, you call in another bad relationship with similar qualities, and it might not be the highest thing, but it's what you know and what you're conditioned, and the preference is there, still there for various reasons. Yeah.
Like at a young age, I really loved Oriental culture. I really loved Japanese anime.
Yeah.
And I could have laid foundations then. And then when I was watching a lot of porn in my younger 20s, I had a preference for Asian porn.
Right.
So then I would have integrated that at a deeper level into my subconscious. And then it's like, is that just what I'm in contact with? Is that what what's conditioned in my system? Or is preference okay? Like, I don't know how that whole system works and what I should try to decondition. Because the more conscious we get, we realize we can decondition anything, right? To some degree.
Yes, and the question is it worth doing that? Like, that's because we tend to like work on certain conditions and prioritize things. I mean, is there any charge for you around it? Like, what's if you do? Yeah, based on what you just described to me, I'd say there's conditioning around it for sure, and comfort.
Charge, like, why it's coming up is
Why
like,
bother deconditioning it?
like, I'm very perplexed by it because it's like, it's really apparent in my subconscious condition. Like, my eye will go towards, because I'm single and on some level looking for a potential partner.
Yeah.
It will always orientate towards an attractive woman.
Could it
who's
also be
Asian,
biological though, like smell and stuff?
genetic, and
Sure, like your body is doing. What I learned about my body, like my body is kind of doing its own thing as well at some level. Like there's certain smells, different ways that people smell, and like with different way,
Sure.
like, and you're just attracted.
yeah. Well,
Nature's well designed.
But like the point of my process here is I think this is the full surrendering of my dreams and my desires.
Yeah.
So what I'm looking to is like operate in the world as an individual, not looking for a partner, not looking to work with his conditioning. So I'm trying to be in the world and not be who I was.
Okay.
So I'm trying to place those to the side, bracket them. So I'm really coming up against it. It's like it's really showing me how it's a waste of energy on some level, right?
But if you're
'Cause
not,
I'm
you're not
looking.
calling it in, then you're not calling it in. Like it's kind of like intentions at its highest. You
Yeah.
get what you look for. The word is you get what you create, what you
Sure.
voice out to the universe.
But it's like you weren't calling in this consciously, and it came through. So it's like we're working at so
yeah.
many levels,
Yeah, I wasn't seemingly calling it in.
and like with
Now that I look at it,
Dieta,
though, I was calling it in. I've looked at it.
like
I
with,
called it in.
with Dieta too, and the work that we do, we're celibate for this period, among other things, and we can't even break these austerities in our dreams.
Right.
So like if I had a sexual dream and I followed through with it, I would still break my Dieta. And I've had a number, and thankfully I've been able to raise my awareness enough in my dream state to be able to resist.
You break the dieta if you if you have a dream that's out of alignment.
Yes.
Okay.
But then it's like, what are the consequences? Which is what a lot of people ask me. And it's different depending on what you're doing and why you're doing it. And for example, I'm doing a plant dieta that's not just through ayahuasca work. I'm dieting bobansana and ahosacha.
Yeah.
So I'm working with the intelligence and the consciousness of those plants. So they're part of what is delivering the quote unquote punishment. But as well, it's also just for me and my level of awareness. It's like in life, it's the same as dieta. We make mistakes and there's consequences. And it's not all fluffy and fairy tales. Sometimes there are real big consequences.
Yeah.
For example, some of the stories that I've heard and read into on dietas, some of the plants will make you go bald, will make you really sick, maybe have a disease. And there's a lot of stories about people even dying. So this is not stuff you want to mess with.
Right.
So these are quite serious in their consequences. I'm at an earlier stage, so I'm working with fairly gentle plants, and I haven't found them to be.
What would you say are the more serious plants that would have higher consequence?
Datura, Toei.
I haven't heard of that. Datura.
Datura, yeah.
That's a cool name.
Datura is, I think that's what a lot of like older, actually I won't say that, I don't know if that's referenced properly. But it can be used in certain contexts to actually like in South America, they'll sometimes give it to people to like confuse them and rob them. It can be very dark and you can go unconscious and I believe even die. There's one of the few plant medicines which has a little bit more of a
Right.
high LD50 or whatever it might be. It's got a lot because plant medicines are known to have a dark and a light. Like tobacco actually has a lot of dark. And this is a teaching. Teachings of the dark are very good. It's like shadow teachings.
Totally.
But if you're working with darker energies and you're using it in a negative way, it can be a downward spiral in a really big way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the plant I'm going to work with is Wachuma, San Pedro.
Mm-hmm.
Have you worked much with San Pedro?
Just once.
Just once?
10 hours of dancing in Wachuma.
And I don't want to project because it's been a couple of years since I sat in ceremony with it. But it's a very heart-centered medicine, so I'm really excited for that.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to project that and expect that it'll be that way again for me because There is instances where people have more challenge. It's a lot more difficult. Mm-hmm. But for me, it's been like it's been the most powerful plant teacher for me ever.
What's the context of the ceremony or the setting? And
we'll be going to 7 sacred centers throughout Peru. I'm not familiar with all of them. One of them is Chavin, where Huachuma was kind of the plant at the center of the awakening and the consciousness revolution.
Okay.
And for thousands of years, that's what they sat in ceremony with. But yeah, we'll pretty much be traveling throughout the country to go and sit in ceremony at various centers.
And is it all one pilgrimage with the same curandero or
yes.
healer, whatever you want to call them?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, he'll be serving us, and I'm really excited.
That's such a beautiful combination, like for spiritual evolution, like a pilgrimage, just traveling alone.
Yeah,
that's so powerful on its own, let alone sacred ceremony. Wow,
man, I have this year specifically though. I have just like fell in love with ceremony. Like I was always super into ceremony, and a lot of the ceremony I did for most of those early years was just by myself. Yeah. But like community ceremony and just sitting with others and singing and prayer through song, like I've just like love it. It's just so good.
Yeah. So
really just falling in love with the practice of prayer and like song prayer through song especially. Mm-hmm. It's like an activity. It's just something you do. Like I'm gonna go. Like I'm a big rock climber, so it's to go climb. Then I'm gonna go do some ceremony, and like it's like
a modern world.
It's an activity. It's like an event. I'm gonna go pray and sing. And
can I ask about your prayer?
Yeah.
We'll just take a quick one. What's the general modality? Like, do you just like have a song prayer, or is there a wider range?
Singing is one thing because all the songs admit a certain thing that you're calling in. Yeah. Some of the songs I've been practicing lately have just been around peyote songs, because we sat in a couple of peyote ceremonies this summer and got to witness this family from Mexico, and they're just like, I've never seen people pray like this. So much devotion, so much joy, so much passion. Like you can just see that they are just singing for spirit. Mm-hmm. Like, and all the songs are basically rooted in various elements, whatever you're calling in, right? So there's fire songs, water songs, earth songs, whatever. Yeah. So those are some of the songs I've been, now there's a water song I recently learned, and it's most of the prayer for me is just gratitude at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's, we're praying to call more in, or I'm praying to call more in of what I want, as if I already have it, right? And I'm creating it through the prayer. It's like the word, right? It goes back to the word of like whatever we speak out into the universe is what begins the creation cycle.
Yeah.
So I try and create the gratitude around whatever it is that I'm praying to. And so if I'm having a glass of water, I'll sing the water song. If I'm with the fire, I'll sing fire song. Thank you for transformation. Thank you for whatever.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And do you have any examples of prayers made manifest?
Things that I've prayed for that came to fruition?
Yeah. You might want to share.
I mean, not specifically. Honestly, I feel like a lot of the things I put my attention on in life come to fruition. And something someone recently told me, and I don't want to make it like everything is a prayer.
Yeah, of course.
But something I was recently reading was very much, it resonated with me a lot because it was very much like that. It's like every thought you have is your prayer.
Thank you.
And you don't want to just be like, everything's a meditation, so then nothing's a meditation, and so you don't have to do anything. But really bringing that level of awareness to like, when you think that thought, it's that first thought that begins the creation cycle, and the universe literally starts creating it. Mm-hmm. And when we find ourselves being pulled in conflict, it's like, oh, this morning I felt really good and I had all these beautiful thoughts, and this prayer is going out. It's emitting this frequency out like to create this. Mm-hmm. But then later that afternoon, now you're like, I hate myself, or like, I'm not good enough, or all those thoughts that might be self-defeating. So it's a conflicting prayer, basically, because our thoughts are not centered, a lot of us.
That's why we continue to come back to ceremony and prayer.
Yeah.
Re-up that alignment.
Yeah, exactly. So I've really kind of started to realize that, and this doesn't make me a master by any means, but like every thought you think creates. Mm-hmm. And it's really just like the God or the universe is just this substrate of like this substance, this infinite substance that just wants to create whatever you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so what do we want?
My teacher used to say our words are spells, like magical spells we're casting all the time.
All the time.
We don't realize. And
spells, yeah, that's exactly what's going on.
Yeah, and I love that. My teacher also used to say that every breath you take and every step you take is a prayer. And just to come back to that, to always, like, as we were mentioning, it's like realign with what we're consciously choosing, what are our thoughts, what are our feelings, what are our actions, and where are they orientated towards, and are they in alignment with our prayer? Yeah,
totally. And when we actually sit down or do real prayer, it's just a more formal way of doing what you've been doing all day anyway.
Completely. Just like, once again, everything is ceremony, and yet in ceremony, we have an opportunity to really live in the most ceremonial, the most sacred way, the most devotional way.
Totally.
Live without all the other superficialities for a period, and then see if we can raise our life to that alignment. Yeah. It's like with the dietas, my teacher says that the plants are holding an energetic space in this dieta that is so beyond what is possible for you to even do. So you're going to fail. You are not going to do this properly. You're going to fail. You're going to mess up. You're going to mess up in many ways. That's just the whole thing. And then you're going to see what you're made of. And that's the whole thing. It's like, we're not going to end up perfect. And that's not really the purpose of this. Yeah. It's to learn. The universe is the university in that way. And then this is a learning period when we go through these sacred ceremonies and other things to raise our learning. It's like, let's go to a greater level of knowledge and seeking of that knowledge through these practices and processes.
Yeah.
And yet, if you fail, there are consequences.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, there are consequences. Those consequences, damn it. Yeah.
And then your journey with breathwork. This is something we both have in common. We've worked with the common teacher, Robin Clements, who's been teaching breathwork for 20 plus years and inspired, I don't know how many people, let's go thousands of people to become facilitators alone, let alone the ripples from that. So he's done amazing work with conscious connected breathing. And what's your story with that, or where's your practice at now?
Well, I'm very early in my practice, I would say. I've only really stepped into it in a more formal way this summer. Mm-hmm. In August, pretty much is what I would say. About 2 years ago, or a year and a half, 2 years ago, I guess, is when I became really aware of it, and it was not from being instructed. It was just me doing I have an annual thing I do. I go off for whatever, 5 to 7 days, and I sit and do my my little ritual where I sit with the mushrooms. Mm-hmm. But I was on this particular ceremony was very high dosage and overstimulating, and in the mind, like it was overstimulating. My mind was getting confused, and for safety, I ended up regressing. I don't know if that's the right word, regressing, but going right into my breath for this really long period, probably like four hours or so. Mm-hmm. And it was so pleasant, so beautiful. And I had this awakening to like, oh my God, the body is just sitting here. Like the whole thing revolves around breath. Mm-hmm. Like the whole experience we're having in this material world or beyond is just all the cells every moment waiting for the breath, like the information. So the way I came out of it, because I do these videos, these integration videos after my ceremonies, and I was like, I rewatched it last year, and I'm just super excited. I'm just like, oh my God, the information is in the air. It's in the information for creation, for everything is coming in through it's in the air. It's going into the lungs. It's transmuting, it's distributing all the information to all the cells that makes the consciousness possible and all these things. And I didn't know how it worked or anything. I still don't, but it was super exciting because I was like, oh my God, it's so funny how we identify with egos when if you're going to identify with anything, we should identify with the breath. That's who you are. Mm-hmm. And that was a huge pivot. It was just like, you are the breath. That's your truest. That's a way more accurate. If you're going to label something, if you're going to identify with something, identify with the breath. That makes a lot more sense. And the logic actually flipped for me. Mm-hmm. So that's how I started with breath. I was like, breath is who you are. Mm-hmm. It's not a Brad. That's not who you are. That's just your little story thing, what you can change and make up. Yeah. But the thing that is truly fundamental to creation and life in this place that we live is the breath. It's everywhere. And therefore you're everywhere. Right? The breath I take right now, that's a part of me. And where is it? It's gone now. It's off into the universe. Well, it's into this place we're in right now. It's in the space. Yeah. But you're kind of just everywhere. Consciousness is just everywhere. And that shifted, for me, that was how it started. And then I realized that I would find a teacher. And I didn't find a teacher right away. It took me probably a year before I found where Robin came up. I knew about you, that you were like full on into breath. And I always watched all your practices, and you share. Yeah, you share. You bring it's consciously putting your attention on the breath, or in my world, it's you're consciously putting your attention on who you are, and what you are. Mm-hmm. And so that's a lot. My breath practice is I'll just sit in that, and it's just like, because and with all the guiding I do or holding space with mushrooms or whatever other plant. Breath is home base. It's just safe. It's so safe. That's why you go there, because it's so full and it's so whole. Yeah. So when I'm breathing, for the most part, that's what I'm focused on, the wholeness of what I am. It's perfect. It's literally perfect. I don't get how it works, but it is very well designed. Uh-huh. Much like the rest of the universe. Like the architecture of breath and all of it is so well designed by God. or us. Really, we're designing it. We're part of the design. We are the design.
We're all sharing in that same cosmic breath.
Yeah.
The spirit, and the breath is the spirit. And it's like when we want to get away from the mind and the whole structuring of the mind, if we engross ourselves in the breath and we're completely absorbed in it, it's beyond mind. We're just at that level of energy.
Yeah, and I'm going to tie this all back, though. So back to prayer even. It's like I'm grateful for who I am and what I am, because what I am is this insanely advanced design that moves through everything. Whether it's moving through the air, it's moving through the trees, transforming itself into the fire, going condensed into the logs, burns back out into the earth, then breathes back through the lungs. It's like, this is who I am. So then when I'm bringing gratitude to all that, mm-hmm. I'm just like, wow, I'm grateful for what I am, this wholeness. So then what I find is when I'm centered in that understanding, as in that wisdom of me, when I'm going through difficulties on a personal level, which is the societal, the personal, the ego, it's easier to do it because you can just be like, you can be present with the experiences without over-identifying. You can identify a little, because that's the way to have an experience. Yeah. If you're not identified in any way or have any attachment, then there's nothing going on, really. Yeah. Right? So I'm going in my personal life, tying it back to what's been going on in my life. Like I'm having this experience where I've got and like these identifications, monogamous, polyamorous, all these things, and it's created deep attachment. Those attachments have been severed, and there's pain associated with it. And then I feel it in my body, and it's like sadness or whatever. And I feel a lot more comfortable to experience it because it's not the highest truth of who I am. Mm-hmm. Because the breath is the highest. Like these are higher truths. Mm-hmm. But I'm free to actually have real human experiences. Yeah. And the way to have real human experiences is to play your roles, and to a degree, without ever falling into like full identification with it. Mm-hmm. It's just a part that you're free to experience.
And I really appreciate the breath wave, the style of breathing that is taught, that is very much Because there are breath practices which can also help us to run away from feeling. This one's very much about surrendering to where we're at now and being present so that we can feel, so we can invite our higher awareness into the body to be present with what's going on at those lower, more dense levels, and then integrate them, love them.
I could actually share with you what came up for me in the last training, which is I realized my breath is, I shallow breathe, and I think this is quite common, but I'm very upper center oriented with my breathing. Mm-hmm. So heart chakra, throat's real, like usually fairly open, and then like seventh chakra, higher breathing. Mm-hmm. And I don't breathe well into my lower areas. And it has a lot to do with my rooting here and feeling like rooted in the earth. And like, maybe this is why I feel safe when I have sex. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. So it's got me asking those questions of like, but my lower stuff is not activated. I don't breathe that well into them. So that's something I've been working on. Mm-hmm. Is just to breathe more deeply. Because I've been breathing that way my whole life then. So to reprogram it is, I don't know how difficult it is because I'm just starting. Maybe you could shed some light on it, but like, just getting my breath down there and activating those spots. And as I've been doing it, I feel the birth, like the insecurities and stuff. So there's a reason I'm not breathing into them. Mm-hmm. Safety, basically.
Yeah, we just mentioned it right there. It's like we have some kind of fundamental block that it doesn't allow the spirit to move down into those places for right now, for whatever's going on in our time in our process, and that's always changing. Until
now. Now I'm being told to do it.
Yeah.
I'm ready to deal with my insecurities, which is what I think it is, and things that I've never acknowledged, and they've never been a part of my ego structure either. Mm-hmm. I've never identified as an insecure person. And I'm not going to start identifying that way, but like,
of course
it's yeah. One thing I always tell people is like, you don't want to force shadow work. I'm not going to go looking for shadows and darkness and making them up, because you can very much just make up a story and then make it real by creating it, because you're a creator. But it's that balance. I don't want to create shadow and look for do shadow work, but I also don't want to avoid it. And now it's the first time where I'm feeling like, oh, there is something there.
Yeah.
And I'm not making it up. Like there's something I can look at here. And I'm being guided to look at it.
It's one of the reasons why when I teach in like holistic medicine and the work that I do, I want to help people to also look towards their goal and their dream and their dharma and their purpose. Because we don't just want to look into our traumas and do healing. I feel like we want to ultimately live in harmony and live our dharma. And part of moving towards that, taking action steps and doing that process will reveal what's incomplete within us or what's holding us back from living in our divine light. So it's like I don't always want to orientate towards just going into the darkness like that without like the light to do that. Because it actually gives us the energy, the motivation, and what we need to do to actually go in there and actually purge out what we need to.
Yeah.
It's our piece on prayer, a prayer that was answered actually from the very first peyote ceremony that I went to. I was praying for my purpose, and I had done like a 10-day fast, and I was praying for my purpose. And then I went to that peyote ceremony, and I wanted more of what I was doing in life. And I met my teacher, Edward Dangerfield, who's one of my other principal breath teachers, that night. And then he asked me to lead a retreat with him I had no breath experience, and then he asked me to mentor under him, which he continued to mentor me and bring me into this world. So that's prayer in action there. And then I really like what you're describing about the chakras, and for individuals listening, the chakras we can also think of as psychophysiological centers of energy located along our spinal cord. And everything in our conscious mind you can kind of think of as being up in the head, in your perception of the five senses and how we see the world. And the subconscious is very much like the body, because the energy in the body has all of our karmas, samskaras. It has all the previous patterns of where we've been. You work out, you've lived your life, it shows in your body.
Yeah.
It's all in the subconscious, in the DNA. And these spinal centers, which are also called chakras, hold a lot of this energy and information from this life and multiple lives. And depending on how we breathe, how we invite in the fundamental life force or chi into our body, it will penetrate deep into these spinal centers or not, depending on how much prana we have and if we have avoidance mechanisms or anything else built into how we're showing up to life right now. So this is always changing. Some individuals may breathe into certain centers during certain times, but in general, we have a default pattern of how we show up in the world due to most prominently the way that we've lived this life from, when we've been born to the experiences we've had, but also through the things that we've brought through in past lives, which it's always a constellation, a hologram of all of our lives showing up in this life.
I actually think too, for me, my whole entrepreneurial journey reflects my root chakra not being, not breathing into those root chakras. Mm-hmm. That's one of the ways I think I have defended trying to feel safe and secure in the world is by performing as an entrepreneur to have security or feeling like I have security in a tangible way, material way. Yeah. But deep down, the root issues in the body.
And for most individuals, myself included, we will almost always, because that's where we carry a lot of our conditioning and our unprocessed emotion, our denser emotions, is in the lower three chakras.
Really?
Because that's where most of our worldly attachments, our desires, and the things of the body, less so of the spirit. Because in the higher chakras, you have less of that kind of just the negative denser emotions are stored there as well, especially in the organs and as well, all within those lower regions. So the process of alchemy is, it's systematic and it's designed in a way that it's like the lower centers are where all the alchemy happens of those emotions. And then there's a phrase in Taoism where they talk about taking ice, and that's the ice and the more physical parts of us, and then we melt it through the alchemical process, and it creates steam, and that kind of metaphor of it rising up is us rising towards our higher centers.
Yeah.
And one more piece on desire, since we've talked about that quite a bit. What I've found is truly we need nothing other than the breath. And when we're completely engrossed in the breath, we're completely self-realized, or
when you're actually fully present to it.
Fully present. We're completely...
That's been my experience as well.
In relationship with our individual self, in harmony, and in relationship with the great self. And it's a desireless state that it's kind of hard to speak about unless you've experienced it, but there's this beautiful equanimity and not needing anything outside of the self, not desiring to go out and eat, to be stimulated by sex, by anything. And it's really beautiful because many people can get there in the breath, and then we come back and we actually go back into the conditioning. And as many times as I've been there, I'm still coming back into the conditioning, and that's the work is to...
I'm actually really glad you brought that up. Yeah, because whether you do it through a plant medicine journey or you do it through breath or you just do it through meditation, what I'm realizing is and I have a lot of teachers I listen to, and it's all about transcendence and just meditate and get out of identification altogether. Yeah. And you can realize these states and you can intellectualize them and know the truth of higher consciousness. But the conditioning's in the body, and until you deal with these things, you keep getting pulled back. Mm-hmm. And that's been my experience, and I think it's something that's been important for me to recognize, because I think for a while I was like, oh, we're not the ego, we're not this thing, we're not but I keep getting pulled back. Why? Yeah, because I haven't really dealt with it and dissolved these blockages or the charge that's embedded within me, these imprints, this karma, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it's one of the things, and I've did a podcast on this, talking about the realm of, I call them mixed mind body arts. I'm throwing in meditation, yoga, qigong, which have a directionality towards enlightenment, towards transcendence of the ego, and then the shamanic traditions, which have typically been more orientated towards healing and then living in harmony with the cycles rather than transcending them.
Yeah.
Of course, there's many ways we can.
Where do you
both
find
within
yourself? Like those are two.
A little bit of both.
Okay.
I don't want to transcend in this life. I'm not going to just go off in a cave, stop eating, and just do breath work. That would probably be one of the best vehicles to go do that if that was my path. I am on a shamanic and I'm on an enlightenment path, and I'm living in harmony with not needing to strive to go beyond that. Mm-hmm. But it's really important for me in my process to have both of these. And you mentioned this earlier, I believe, is to have an anchoring in a spiritual practice, which is breath-based, which creates more stability in being in the spiritual process, because we can reach these heightened states if we're going in the enlightenment process through plant medicines where we dissolve our ego, but it's just going to come back.
Yeah.
So unless we have a stabilized state or a way of being and operating, which is breath work, yoga, and the ways that we can work with our body and mind each and every moment, I just don't see it being stable enough. I don't see.
You're talking about all plant medicines, that as a stable path.
Yeah.
Or a reliable path even.
Yeah, because we want all the power within us. So if I need a tool outside of myself, like the ultimate truth of reality and my own Buddha nature and enlightenment has to be within me and realizable, attainable here in each and every moment. Otherwise, I've given my power outside of myself.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of commitment to actually live to embody that truth and not just say it. And that takes a lot of practice and work.
Yeah, it's like plant medicine can be like a little boost, little jump start sometimes. But you're right, you're ultimately giving away that something else is going to have to come and assist me.
And it depends on your system. Like I'm going through the ayahuasca system. It's not really known as a system, but I'm calling it a system. Because like most people, we find this a lot, especially in Vancouver and other areas. It's like you do a spiritual thing this day, a peyote ceremony this day, and then another thing that day. That's not a spiritual path, or it is and it isn't. But like I'm committed on an ayahuasca path, which means I'm doing these dietas for the rest of my life, which is a much longer and sustained 24/7 in my waking and in my dreams spiritual process, rather than just a one-off ceremony and then an integration. I'm in continual spiritual process with this, and then I'm also in concurrent spiritual process with my breath work and other practices, which I'm always running on some level with like awareness of my breath and my energy centers, etc.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the way to do it, right? You become the thing that it's repetition, repetition in a directed way, right? Even if it's just like even religious people, like it's the same thing. They're reading the same book forever,
right?
Right? It's all centered in one direction, and you're not deviating.
Yeah.
So then you become it. You become aligned to that.
And that's not to discount the more non-linear path of like trying all these things.
I think we talked about last time you came on my podcast.
Yeah.
About there's a time for testing, and then at some point you may or may not pick a lineage.
Yeah. Well, it's like relationships, dating, and
it's always like that. Or I just read a book called Mastery, and it says the same thing. Like you ultimately eventually have to pick a thing, and you become a master.
Mm-hmm. And then once
you fall in love with the practice,
a level of mastery, it's like martial arts. You can't do one every day and think you'll learn it. But if you learn one and then you go to another and then you combine them, you can do that.
Yes. Yeah, you can do that.
So that's what I'm attempting to do with Qigong and yoga, breathwork, and plant medicines. It's like there's a finesse because I can't practice all of those at once because it wouldn't be beneficial. Because like for many people, if you don't know too much about Qigong and yoga, we can kind of lump them in the same way because they're like, oh, they're kind of like the same-ish. But you can't practice them concurrently because we're building our whole physiological structure as well as our energetic, and they're built in different ways. So it's trying to like being an endurance runner and a bodybuilder. It's running two different programs at different times. Now you can kind of mix and match some meditations.
Can I do rock climbing and yoga?
You can do whatever you want, but it's not, it may or may not be inefficient and effective. Like you can run and be a bodybuilder. You just won't be the best bodybuilder or the fastest runner.
Totally. Yeah, I get that. Yeah. I mean, and same thing. I used to work out when I was young, like not bodybuilding exactly, but like pretty close to bodybuilding, I'd say. Mm-hmm. I don't do any of that stuff to train for climbing. Training for climbing is very specific training. Yeah. To attune my body. My body is learning to navigate vertically up rocks. Like it has to adapt. It just takes time to adapt. A lifetime. Yeah. Like it's almost better to look at it that way. It's just adaptation to your body's learning to adapt to walk up rocks upwards, vertical.
Yeah. What a beauty it is that all the different ways that our bodies can adapt.
It's nuts how our bodies can adapt to so many different things. They can adapt to like literally climbing up seemingly smooth rock walls to diving deep below in the water and just holding your breath for like 7-10 minutes. I don't know how long they do it, but like their bodies are designed to just go deep in deep waters, and that's a totally different thing.
And that's the body and the mind as well. Like
the mind.
I've been listening to a bunch of people with completely different viewpoints than I have, and it's been so beautiful. Have you heard of soft white underbelly? I believe it's called.
No, I haven't. What is it?
It's a YouTube channel, but it's kind of Mark something.
Okay,
soft white underbelly, I believe it is.
Okay.
And he's done like maybe 30,000 of these things.
Yeah.
And they're just interviews that he does, but he does them with like prison inmates and homeless people on Skid Row in LA.
So he interviews just all sorts of diverse people.
Of the class of like homeless people, drug addicts, cocaine addicts, pimps, all these things. People that I would not usually speak to on a day-to-day. And he gets them to talk about their life in a very real and authentic way.
Yeah, like, okay.
And
to learn about their point of view.
Yeah, and he does it in a really beautiful, non-biased way.
You know what? I think I have seen this guy, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quite popular right now. That's why
I
heard about it. He was on Joe Rogan, so he got a big spotlight there.
Okay, well, what about him? So he does that.
So we're talking about like the adaptability of different minds.
Yeah.
And I'm just seeing how their minds adapt to specific circumstances, like being in prison or being a pimp. And it's just so far out of my mind's context of how I think, see the world, and operate that it's incredibly eye-opening and also visceral and really deep in my like awakening to witness
and really
them.
True for their reality.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's a big teaching on understanding. Like he talks about the homeless, the issues going on with them. And he's like, well, it's not a homeless problem that you can just solve by putting them in houses, because there's a substance abuse problem behind it. So
simple. They need a house. That's all.
Yeah. And it's not substance abuse.
Yeah.
It's mental illness. And it's not mental illness. It's poor childhoods. And it's not poor childhoods. It's multi-generational. And it's like, it's just a symptom of a larger issue, and they're just the individials who are
like, how far back does this thing go? And then it just becomes systemic.
Exactly.
We are what we've created. Mm-hmm. And it goes back forever, really. How far back do you want to go and do your ancestral work? And
that's the same. I've been keeping up with the news recently, which I haven't done in previous years.
Oh wow! Tell me, I haven't kept up with that in a while. What's going on?
Download.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not looking good in Russia.
Okay.
That's what I've been following.
What's going on?
So Russia and Ukraine, and this is speaking to that thing. It's not just Russia and Ukraine. It's these larger constellations of things, and their outpourings of like these conflicts have been going on in each individual country and in the larger constellation of other countries.
Yeah.
But like the pieces I was hearing about, and I wish I could remember this guy's name because he's got fascinating content. He talks about all the resources that are in between Russia and then in Ukraine, as well as all the sanctions and how that's going to affect the global population.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's a potential that during the war in the next little bit, we're going to destroy like a lot of the capacity for wheat to be distributed out of Russia and Ukraine, as well as many different changes in oil, as well as neon and many other essential minerals and other things.
Yeah.
So you're looking at huge drops in our fertilizer, huge drops in our wheat, huge drops and increases in the price in oil. The estimate was around $2.50 a liter, could suddenly go up within like months. And these things are going to take 50 years or more, some of them, to replenish these soil replies. So this is all stuff that's like coming up in the next few months, is some of the changes. And it's like, it's such a complex issue. Once again, it's not those individuals, it's this larger piece that we're all...
It's not just that one guy's greedy and he wants Ukraine.
Yeah, not that Putin's just a psychopath and it's just all him. This is a much bigger thing.
Yeah.
So that kind of like, I enjoy going through it right now, because it really like activates me in a way. Like I start praying right away. I was like, what can I do in this moment, in this second, and what pray right now, and then live to a higher prayer. And yeah, and I don't feel like it's affecting me, because you want to be careful of being like ridden by fear and then have that beginning to run in the nervous system. I don't feel like it's hitting me there.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's increasing my metta and my compassion.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It can be overwhelming when you.
It is.
Oh, it can, or sometimes I feel it the other way. When you go back, you keep going back so far that it actually becomes okay as well, because it's just so long rooted that you're like, okay, and then I'm here now, and it brings me to presence sometimes.
Yeah.
It could be overwhelming, or sometimes it forces me into presence. Like, with all that being said, everything that's happened has led us all to this moment we're having, and then here we are.
Yeah. And like, we live in such a beautiful place.
We got less wheat, but more microphones and cameras and cool other things.
Yeah. And that's just like the problem where it's at, and naming a bunch of the things. And we can do that in our own personal lives and see these, and then understand that there's a larger process that's happening, which is unfathomable as to where it's going to go. There's not a single person on this planet that could have predicted 5 years ago where we're at today.
No.
So there's a higher intelligence and orchestration here, and yeah, we can just continue to live in our highest alignment.
Yeah.
So I think it's really powerful work that you're doing as you're going away, and I'm doing a similar recalibration with this dieta. I'm going in Vipassana in a few days, or on the 18th, which is a week or so away. And it's like, I don't know what's best. So I'm going to do my best to surrender my mind, be in ceremony and prayer and community. And that's the only way forward that I know, because it's me showing up and saying that I don't know. And, you know, it's like the fundamental questions we just keep asking them. What do I do now? What do I do now?
Yeah, and enjoying it
Yeah.
at some level. Like, something I learned in just basic philosophy many years ago is like, you do it because you have to love it. Like, the spiritual path is about really falling in love with the practices, the journeys, the ceremonies. Like, I hosted
lack of sex.
Yeah.
The lack of desire.
Yeah, all of it. The sadness, the joy, all the things, right? Like, just being present with all these. One of my favorite, I don't know if it's my favorite, is just like my most important understanding is just the law of change, right? And that, sometimes that can seem, difficult to deal with, because so much of our lives often is like trying to like not change. Even our nervous system, all these things are trying to get us regulated and to stabilize us. But in truth, everything's moving, everything's changing. And with that being said, it's so important to be present with with the experience happening, because it's going to be gone immediately. Like, it doesn't last. It'll be different tomorrow. Everything changing. And that roots me into a lot of things. And now that I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and I don't really understand where I come from on the deepest levels. And so all there is just me here now.
Yeah.
And what do I feel? Yeah. And, that's very contrary to where my background of, I guess, ego, where you're like, I know who I am. I know where I come from. I know where I'm going. In a very tangible, visual, like, way.
Yeah.
Right? My vision, and this is who I am, and all that stuff. And I don't feel that anymore to the same level, which sometimes brings me peace, but sometimes brings me anxiety, but a lot of the time it brings me peace too. Mm-hmm. That I don't have to fix everything.
Yeah. We did like a practice in my yoga teacher training, and we looked at another person like we're doing right now.
Yeah.
And then we just looked at them in the eyes, and we had two intentions we were supposed to go back and forth between. One was, I'm holding you in your wholeness. And the other is, I can fix you. And it was visceral. It was palpable when those were switched.
Like, I've done similar, yeah, where I'll do like, say we're sitting here and it's just like, I'd ask you, I'd say, put your attention on me now as someone who needs to be fixed. That's how I'd say that.
Yeah.
And then you would put your attention on me as someone who needs to be fixed. And I'd probably go maybe 20, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And then I'd say, tell me what came up for you. And then you respond back with whatever's arising, the first thought that arose for you. Mm-hmm. Then you'd reverse it. And you say, put your attention on me as someone who is whole and complete, just as I am. And then they do that 30 seconds. What happened? Then they tell you. And then you literally go back and forth between the two instructions for maybe 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And it just changes everything based on how you put your attention on it.
Yeah. Even as you said that, I forget what the movie is. Well, my mind immediately went to that little boy. It's like, please, sir, can I have some more? I need help.
Yeah. Right? Do we need to be fixed? And, you know, as someone who's holding space too, is interesting, like, to how you work with people. Do they need your help? I'm going to help you, which also creates that dynamic of like, I have the information, or I know something and you don't. Right. You need you need me to help you. Mm-hmm. When, again, it goes back, like, does anyone need my help? And it's a balance. There's some level of a balance in that, how we put our attention on ourselves as facilitators, as space holders. And up until pretty recently, a little bit more now because I have some extra tools like breathing that I'm starting to work with. Yeah. But I've very much come from, in the early years of working one-on-one with people in ceremonies. And only until last year, I never worked in group ceremonies before, where I'd host group ceremony. But I didn't do anything. I was literally, my role was like, I'm kind of like a helper, is how I saw myself. Because I fucking don't know. Yeah. Like, I don't know what is going to come. The only thing I can really do is make sure you are physically safe and that it feels like you're safe enough to look at whatever the hell you got to look at. Sure. And so I'd like bring tea and I'd tend to the fire and pretty much, and my number one principle would be non-interference. It's very important I don't interfere. Yeah. Like, get in the way. It's almost the opposite of I'm going to help you. It's like, I'm going to get out of the way because I don't want to interfere with you. Yeah. And yeah, so that was kind of my approach for most of it. And recently I've done a few ceremonies where I'm actually going to sit with you and just, probably not talk much, but I'll sit and just, breathe and be peaceful. Me being peaceful and sitting is my contribution. Yeah. Because then it's a nice energy and I'm just, of course, it's okay. Like, it's all peaceful. Yeah. And that's how I can contribute. And that helps.
So I think so important with spiritual work is like not to confuse being a healer and the true source of healing, which is the individual's connection with their inner healer or with their spirit.
Yeah, very much. And in the medicine wheel, which is that program I took last year, where you learn about the 4 directions and how to pray for all the directions and what the archetypes, all that stuff. Yeah. But that was a huge theme of like, we're not going to fix other people. Yeah. We're not there to fix people. We're here to hold sacred space for people.
And it's like
to do the work.
It's not just like a conceptual thing, especially when doing healing work and breath work. Like in my Qigong, we learned a full a beginning ritual to allow the energies to move through us and to kind of set aside our personal mind and body and our intentions and expectations so that we can actually be present and listening to the field. And it's like a more of it's a whole different alchemy, and you'll know it if you practice a lot, whether you're giving your energy away or whether your energy is getting entangled in that.
Yeah.
This is also why like the work that I'm doing right now is so important, and it makes such a big difference in the work that I do, is when I'm surrendering my personal mind and desires through this process of dieta and others.
Yeah.
It's like it's strengthening that resolve to not my will, but the higher will be done.
Totally. That makes a lot of sense, right? What will? Which will?
Exactly.
Right.
I'll put you on the spot here. What are some qualities of a really good space holder?
Qualities of a good space holder? Well, one is that they're in practice with they're doing their own personal work as a way of life. The other would be positive intent, I'd say, for themselves and for those who they serve, and I think organization actually as well. Yeah. Being an organized person and attention to detail. So like attention to detail, I think, is very important. I know when I'm setting up spaces, whether it's ceremonial or like you've been to some of my events that I do in the forest, I do sacred dance, and clearing the energy, making sure everything is well orchestrated so that it is a safe, sacred space. Yeah. Right? It's energy clearing. And that's not always just, it's both the personnel. So like me, I have to clear my own energy and make sure I prepare for ceremony well. Right? So often if I'm hosting a ceremony, I'm preparing in the same way that the person I'm hosting for is in my own right, which my intent is usually to hold a safe, sacred space. Right? If you simplify the intention, my intention is to hold safe, sacred space for the person who's coming to ceremony. So I'm doing that inner energy clearing, and then I'm also logistically doing a good job to make sure the space itself is nice and clean. Like I got here to do this podcast here today, and it's the room is nice and clean, and it's centered so that it feels aligned. So those are some qualities. I haven't thought about this because you just put me on the spot, but those are the ones that are coming up right away. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's your intention, though. A good space holder has a really well-crafted intention for what he's doing, or what they're doing. Right? The reason I like to hold ceremony is because I love ceremony. I like being held in ceremony, and when I'm being held, I'm really grateful to the space holders. And then I like to do the space holding too. They're two different experiences, and I love both of them. I really like them. And you know what? I used to be a real estate agent.
Did you?
I was a real estate agent for a year, and I didn't like selling houses, and I didn't like buying the houses. I was like, I don't like either side of the transaction, so I quit.
Yeah.
Right? So, whatever we're doing, you have to love the whole thing.
I like that. You have to be on both sides.
You gotta, you want to be a great teacher, you got to be a great student. You want to be a great rock climber, you have to be a great student there too, and you have to be you teach the younger people.
Okay, well, I would consider myself, and I don't think I'm being hard on myself, that I'm not at the highest level of marketing, and I hate marketing. I hate when people sell me.
You have a conflict then.
I need to work on that.
Yeah, I bet you can. There's a difference between because that's too general. What was the thing we generalized earlier? Oh, we generalized earlier you were like, you called it holistic healing. What did you categorize the entire thing by?
Holistic medicine.
Yeah, that's like saying I don't like holistic medicine. It doesn't mean anything because it's too general.
Sure.
So you can't just say I hate marketing, but you could be like, I don't align with these tactics and strategies for marketing, right? There's tactics and strategies for marketing where they prey on fear and scarcity. But another equally valuable way to do marketing is just to do inspiration. Like that's a channel to inspire,
Yeah.
And personally, they're both going to get the result of like action from someone, and they both compel the same thing: is I'm not where I want to be. But I still feel that even though I don't think either of them is the best from a spiritual perspective, I'd rather inspire someone to want to change their life than to fear them into you need to change your life because of the travesty that will occur if you don't do it.
Right. Okay, I like what you said. Like all of that, but one of the pieces that stood out is they prey on fear and scarcity.
Yes.
Because I remember studying persuasion psychology in psychology before I got into marketing. And then I didn't feel comfortable with it because I did feel, and I didn't use the word pray, but it was like...
the praise is not relevant. They use that tactic.
They use that tactic, and it's very common, like, to show scarcity in some way.
Yeah, you got to do it now. Act.
You got to do it now. So you would say, like, I think it's really important to have, like, values that are in alignment at all levels of your business if you're doing spiritual marketing.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I really like, because I didn't resonate with so many of these pieces. I'm like, I could do that, but it doesn't really feel good to do that.
And you don't need to. You, like anything, when you pick a marketing strategy or channel strategy for your business, there are so many thousands of tactics. But if you really want to execute any given tactic, you need to pick, they call it a marketing mix, a bundle of tactics, and you make a commitment to those tactics, and you only have so much money as well to invest in your marketing. So in order to execute any one tactic, you can only spend some... You
Sure.
just pick maybe 3 to 5 tactics, and that becomes your marketing mix, and they work together.
Mm-hmm.
But you could, in terms of the psychology, you could just go with inspiration, which a lot of companies, and that'd be great. You don't actually need to have multiple psychological channels.
Yeah.
You could just be like, spiritual life is beautiful.
Yeah.
Because it is. It really is. It's like ceremony and spiritual life is a beautiful path.
And its highs and lows.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, highs and lows is part. It doesn't even matter if you're a spiritual guy. You're still going to. Highs and lows is not even. You don't even need to mention it. It's just everyone knows there's highs and lows in life.
Yeah.
But it's just beautiful. So your marketing could just be beauty. And I know a lot of people who that is what they do, like some of the guys that I follow. Mm-hmm. And some of them, actually, I know a lot of spiritual leaders that I also respect and love. Are currently, I notice that their message is very fear-oriented. Yeah. Like, you need to awaken right now and transcend the ego because otherwise you're screwed.
I won't give a shout out to this guy. One of the reasons because I don't fully remember his name, but I watched a few of his things. Yeah. And then he literally said, probably shouldn't say literally because I'm paraphrasing, but it's like the end of the world is coming. Mm-hmm.
Is his name Shinyamurti?
Yeah, that's it.
Yes.
And he's like, there's nuclear bombs and they're going to go off. And he was putting all this stuff out there with such certainty. And he was being interviewed. I'm like, why are you not questioning this? He's just like, okay, sure, that's going to happen. Like, why are you not being like, okay, where are you coming from?
Okay, I'd love to talk about him for a minute then. Because Shinyamurti has been very influential for me. Yeah. I really respect, he's such a good speaker, mm-hmm. like an incredible speaker. He's clearly very knowledgeable. Like he has done his work, or his homework. He has read probably a lot of the texts. He's been doing all the things, right? But then as I kept on listening to him, that really started to creep in how much of it is driven from like, be afraid if you don't do the work right now in this lifetime, like you're really going to suffer the consequences in your karmic path, mm-hmm. and it's going to be really bad for you. Yeah. And maybe maybe he's not, I don't know, maybe he's right. But I'm also like, is that now I don't feel good now.
It definitely put me on a process. It triggered something.
It triggered me for sure. And I still listen to him today. Yeah. But I am aware of where he comes from a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, I'm not against, like, personally, like, listening to people who I don't agree with if they're bringing stuff up for me.
But I'm not sure if I don't agree with him yet. I'm just saying he's speaking, there's a lot of fear in the tone of, like, you got to come do your work now and transcend the ego. His message, if you had to summarize it, is transcend the ego now. Mm-hmm. Don't wait. Don't make it a big process.
Sure.
It's not a process. Transcend your ego like tomorrow.
Right. Or now.
But then he's also one of the guys that doesn't speak to trauma or body, like imprints in the body. He's just like, you can just do it tomorrow. Do it.
Yeah.
And they don't even acknowledge trauma or anything that's going on in the body or imprints or any of these things, which is really the thing I think that brings us back into duality consciousness and like being stuck in stories and stuff.
Yeah. Well, in that particular interview, he also mentions ayahuasca. I did watch multiple.
Oh, he said no to that.
And he said no because it doesn't stabilize. And once again, from my path,
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not saying it's a permanent way. It's like a ceremony. It's like a sadhana. It's like a practice. Mm-hmm. And it's part of a larger system. That's how I view it anyways. So it's like, I felt like that was not a fair assessment of that whole world. And I don't think this is a good strategy, but I do it anyways. If I find a teacher, I like to look them up. So I'll type in their name and I'll look up controversy or fraud or whatever it is. And
Did you find stuff on him?
I found stuff on him.
What kind of stuff did you find?
There's a website that's like
just on him.
Yeah, for
Whoa.
people to come in and talk about their experiences of how they've been misguided by him. So there's some like long people speaking about kind of maliciousness or wanting money, etc. And it does kind of fit with what I was building. And once again, these are all my projections. So I'm projecting all over you. I don't know any of these things about him. I just kind of want to.
I actually think I've seen that site. I didn't browse it, but I knew it was there, I think.
Yeah. And then he did talk about this end, which was so assured.
He just wrote a book on it.
Did he? And then he also talked about how not the whole planet would be destroyed, which kind of sounded like he was contradicting himself. But he's like, well, Costa Rica will be fine, which is where he has a retreat center.
His ashram?
Yeah, I was like, so the world's going to die. Bomb's going to go off. But your retreat center is fine.
Yeah.
He's like, you're in the know. So maybe.
He's so certain.
He's so certain.
It seems like nothing can faze him.
That's the thing about anyone who offers any spiritual prediction. It's like, I don't follow with that. It's like probabilistically to me.
Right.
So when someone's so certain about that, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. I think more recently, though, like I said, I did follow him quite a bit. I was quite stoked on him. But it's only now recently that I'm looking more into like the somatics and breath and stuff, and that there are imprints in our bodies. And especially now, because I'm personally having experiences for the first time where I'm getting access to stuff within myself on a deeper level and without plant medicines. Because I really thought that I needed plant medicines was like a really good path for me, because it always gave me the biggest insights and gave me access. And now only until recently, in the last 3-4 months, when I've working through breath, I've actually been able to access things. And it's like, whoa, I'm doing it without plant medicines. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a story change, but it also puts into the question with like guys like Shinya Murti. I'm like, I've listened to a lot of his videos. And whenever he has a new one, I still listen to them. But he never talks about trauma or anything to do with imprints in the body. He just says like transcend all your karma, basically.
And that's one thing about like the spiritual intention of transcension, ascension, whatever it is, enlightenment. It's like the more that I listen to a lot of my teachers in the ayahuasca traditions, Shipibo traditions, they never mention any of that.
What? The
transcension.
Oh, yeah.
Of like completely ascending past this. And they're all just about, no, the work is continual. We're always going to heal. We're always going to show up. We're always going to learn
Hence
more.
why you got to love the work.
You got to love the work.
You got to love doing the work.
If you love inner work, you got to do your worldly work and then your inner work after that. You got to like your overtime.
Yeah.
But they talk about in ayahuasca, there's levels of like kind of like levels of enlightenment. And at the highest level, these people have like dieted for like 5 years at a time, multiple times, and they can basically like beam around the world. There was one story where some guy beamed out of ceremony and like shamanically traveled, and then he came back with a drum, and he was like bringing things back from other parts of the world, and apparently, at that highest level. But once again, they're more like bodhisattvas, I would see. Mm-hmm. It's like they're just here to continue to help people to heal and not transcend, and it's just a whole different energy.
Yeah, and I'm more aligned to that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, because if you really think, like, I don't know if you looked into any of Shunyamurti's programs.
No, I didn't see the programs.
Essentially, you're just meditating for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is that everything you're experiencing is an illusion. It's Maya. It's a fantasy. Every projection in your mind, it's all fantasy. The only truth and reality is what he's saying is the emptiness. He's like, you need to rest in the truth of the emptiness, which is infinite potentiality. Yeah. And he speaks very beautifully to it. Like, the emptiness and the potentiality of it all is so beautiful. And like, that's where you want to be. That's who you are. Yeah. So don't ever be fooled by any of the duality or any of the Maya. Yeah. That's all not even. It doesn't even exist. He says it doesn't even exist. So there's not even anything there to transcend.
Right.
It doesn't even exist to begin with. Uh-huh. You don't even have an ego to transcend. Is how he speaks to it.
I was listening to Sam Harris, and it's the same thing. And there's a truth to that.
There's totally a truth to that. But then why don't we do it? And I think that's where, like I said, I can sit in meditation, absorb myself in the breath, and sometimes it's a beautiful hour or 20 minutes or 10 minutes sometimes, whatever. Yeah. But then why do I go back into the drama of duality? Because either I'm choosing it, I want to, or there's imprints bringing me back to it. Yeah. And I don't know, maybe both. Maybe I am just choosing it because it's exciting. Yeah. The emptiness is quite...
Does he teach anything other than meditation, like body-based practices?
I've never done... I haven't done a lot of his work on that side. Yeah. But for the most... I've sat in a few of his meditations, and it's really just like... very pure, like, rest in emptiness.
Mm-hmm. This is another thing in the spiritual process. It's always like choices, decisions, commitments on our spiritual way. And there's another big divide among the Enlightenment traditions. And one is just the meditators, like certain sects of Buddhism, which they don't have a yoga or an asana practice, a physical practice.
Right.
They're like, well, the body is, it's just a vehicle. We're going to discard it at some point. Let's just focus on meditating on the light, the higher centers, etc. Yeah. And then there's a whole nother energy work, energy healing, somatic practice, body-based. Some of those just stay at that level. Like a lot of Qigong is meant to just heal the body and not really transcend the body. Yeah. And then there's traditions that combine them, like the complete system of yoga, the complete systems of Qigong and Neigong and other things. Yeah. So it's like I'm in alignment with both of those together. And I don't think they should be separated. And we won't get into it, but there's a finer argument as to why the system of like the Buddhists where they just sit doesn't always work. And like the brief on that is that they don't have enough chi to transcend because there's an alchemical process that takes place in the body and building up a certain pressure in the lower centers, which allows the energies to rise up the spine. They use a lot of imagination, and that imagination without the fuel of the chi is not as effective, because if you're just imagining a deity, it's less effective.
No, it makes sense. The more you need more energy.
More Jing Qi, they call it. Yeah, it's a certain type of essence that allows.
You're just and you're activating as many things as you can to assist.
Sure.
As much like your Qi, you're using the mind, you're using the thoughts, you're using the vision, you're using the body. Like you're trying to center everything. Yeah. More energy.
And of course, it could just be different paths. Everyone's got their different way. Some people it's complete control, some people it's complete letting go, and then the middle, and everything in between.
Yeah. With Shunyamurti, I was looking at his program, though. It's you go to the ashram, there's meditation every morning, there's meditation in the afternoon, there's meditation in the evening. Between meditation, there's walking contemplations, eating contemplations, mostly solo time. No reading, no writing, no sex. And then there's, in between, there's satsang, where you ask a spiritual master questions. And that's pretty much what all his YouTube channel's videos are. Yeah. Is satsang every day, where you ask, in between all of your stuff, you can ask questions, and then he answers them on film. Yeah. And it gets posted to YouTube.
Yeah.
That's his marketing.
This is on alignment with me. Like, I love practice. I practice 2 to 4 hours.
I think they have a little bit of asana. There as well, a little to move your body. You got to move your body a little.
But like when I'm done my spiritual practice, I don't want to do spiritual things all day. I want to do worldly things, and I want to go listen to interviews with homeless people. Right, that's balance.
Me too. I'm a pretty normal guy.
Pretty normal.
I'm pretty normal. I'm medium.
I've seen you dance, and you're not pretty normal.
I'm medium normal guy. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll finish. I'm going to say a few words and give me a word or the first kind of few words that come to mind, all right?
All right, let's do it.
Past lives.
Past lives. Many.
Love.
Lots.
Chakras.
Alignment.
Shunyamurti.
Shinyamurti. Emptiness came up.
Emptiness, fair enough.
Wow, that's weird. Good, that was cool.
Hate.
Yeah, real.
Polygamy.
Polyamory.
Polyamory.
Polyamory. Confusing.
Fate.
Beautiful.
Suicide.
Suicide. Karma. Interesting.
Dharma.
Purpose.
Jesus.
Beautiful.
Brad Samuels.
He's funny. He's funny. Brad Samuels.
And we'll end there. Any final insights that you have to offer anyone here? Or anything going on that you'd like to share?
What's the name of the podcast again? What'd you say? Aya Om. Insights for anyone who watched this kind of podcast. I think the best insight I have is to enjoy the spiritual path for all of it is, for all the ups and downs. Just like to really bring presence to each stage, and always remember that like the point of each stage is to be present and aware of the stage that you're in. Right? So spiritual path is a beautiful path to identify with.
Beautiful. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. As I said, every interaction that we've had, I've had a very positive, and I've walked away with a lot, as I did with this podcast and this interview. So thank you for coming on the podcast. Aya Om.